Do you know what this clock says? If not, don't worry. Today you'll be learning how to tell time to the minute. Let's get started by meeting our guests.
Oh, hello there, Mr. Steve. We all know how much you love to fish, but most people do not know that you are also a big fan of telling time.
This is Mrs. Corbley. You probably know how much she loves to garden. She also really loves to tell time, just like me.
Take a look at this clock. At this time, Mr. Steve takes a break. What he does on his break is up to him. Let's figure out what time Mr. Steve gets his break. First, we will learn how to tell time to the hour. Look at the shorthand. It's pointing to the 9. That means we are in the 9 o'clock hour. Since the minute hand, or the long hand, is pointing to the 12, that means it is simply 9 o'clock.
Let's look at another one. We have Mrs. Corbley out in the hallway getting a drink. What time is it when Mrs. Corbley can go get a drink? First, I'm going to look at the hour hand. This time it is pointing to the 2. Now I will look at the minute hand. It is pointing to the 12. Since no minutes have passed 2, it must be 2 o'clock.
Now it is your turn. Take a look at Mr. Steve kicked back taking another break. What time is this break? Pause the video and solve. Did you get 4 o'clock? If so, you know how to tell time to the hour. Great work!
Now we will be moving on to telling time to the half hour. Here we have Mrs. Corbley teaching math. It looks like she's teaching some multiplication. What time does she teach math? First, let's look at the hour hand. It is in the middle of the 10 and the 11. It has not yet reached the 11, so we know we are in the 10 o'clock hour. Now we must see how many minutes are past 10. When the minute hand is pointing to the 6, it is halfway around the clock. So it is half past 10, or we could say 10:30.
Look at Mr. Steve eating that chicken. It must be his dinner time. What time do you think Mr. Steve gets to eat his dinner? First, I will look at the hour hand to see what hour we are in. It is between the 4 and the 5, so I know I'm in the 4 o'clock hour. Now I see that the minute hand is pointing to the 6, so I know it is half past 4, or 4:30.
Your turn. Here we have Mrs. Corbley reading aloud to her class. Pause the video and solve to find out what time Mrs. Corbley reads to her class. If you got 9:30, you know how to tell time to the half hour.
Let's continue to learn to tell time to the 5-minute interval. We will by seeing what Mr. Steve is up to now. It's bright and early in the morning and Mr. Steve is arriving to school. What time did he get to school today? Let's look at the hour hand first. It is between the 6 and the 7, so I know that I am in the 6 o'clock hour. Now I have to count by 5s to see how many minutes past 6 it is. I will be counting by 5s on the big numbers starting at 1. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. When the minute hand is pointing to the 5, 25 minutes have passed the hour, so it is 6:25.
Oh boy, it looks like Mrs. Corbley has gone to bed for the day. What is her bedtime? Let's check the clock. First, I will look at the hour hand to see that it is almost on the 9, but not quite yet. So I am still in the 8 o'clock hour. I will count by 5s around the clock to see how many minutes past 8 it is. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55. Wow! It is 8:55. Don't be tricked into thinking it is 9:55. The shorthand is not yet reached the 9.
It looks like Mr. Steve has a bit of a disaster on his hands. He's doing some plunging. What time did this mess happen? Pause the video and solve for the time. Did you get 1:45? If so, you know how to tell time to the 5-minute interval.
Whew! You have done some hard work. We are not done yet. There is one more step. We must learn to solve for time to the minute. Mrs. Corbly is on a coffee break. What time does she get her break? First, let's look at the hour hand. It is on the 9, so we are in the 9 o'clock hour. Now let's count the little marks because each one represents 1 minute. This time there are only 2 little marks. So only 2 minutes have passed the hour. It is 9:02 when Mrs. Corbly can get a cup of coffee.
Oh boy, this is a tricky one. Mr. Steve is out and about on his little scooter. What time can Mr. Steve be caught running around on his scooter? First, I will look at the hour hand. I might be tricked into thinking that it's on the 12th, but it's not quite there yet. It is still in the 11 o'clock hour. How many minutes are past 11? Well, I will start by counting by 5s until I get to the 11, and then I will switch to counting by 1s. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59. It is 11:59. It's almost 12, but not quite yet.
Your turn. It must be the end of Mrs. Corbly's day because she's getting into her car. What time does Mrs. Corbly go home? Pause the video to see what time she goes home. If you got 3:17, you are a time genius. Let's solve one more just for fun.
Mr. Steve is exhausted. He is taking a rest after his busy day. What time is Mr. Steve relaxing? Pause the video and solve. If you got 4:47, you are ready to tell time on your own. I hope you learned a lot today about telling time. If you see Mr. Steve
Or Mrs. Corbly.
you can tell them that they helped you learn all about telling time.